This presentation we will examine events leading up to the June 27th, 1844 martyrdom of Joseph Smith and his brother Hyrum. We're also going to focus on some of the higher officials such as Governor Ford and other prominent individuals who helped conspire to set up these circumstances so that Joseph and his brother Hyrum could be murdered. Here's a picture of Governor Thomas Ford. Other high government officials were also involved, of course, but Thomas Ford played a key role in the martyrdom, as documented in various eyewitness accounts. To this day, no justice nor reparations have been made to the descendants of these families of Missouri and Illinois of the persecutions of that time, the 1830s and 1840s. This video is the 179th anniversary of the martyrdom. While a very young man, Joseph Smith had been told that his name should be had for good and evil among all nations, kindreds, and tongues, or that it should be both good and evil spoken among all people. It seems the name of Joseph Smith was predestined to be spread to the entire world, whether it was through good or evil means. You can go around the world and you can ask people about famous, prominent government leaders or celebrities. They don't always know who you're talking about, but it seems Joseph Smith has been heard about all over the world. We also have the predatory anti-mormon movement, which continues to have big business potential even now with the social media and the internet giving them a boost in getting their message out. The large anti-Mormon movement continues to have its chief purpose to attack and discredit Joseph Smith at every opportunity. They've also been proven to be lucrative money-making ventures. The CEO of one anti-Mormon themed YouTube channel has a salary in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for the purpose of preying on the doubts of members of this Latter-day Church with the sole aim to turn them against the religion and earn money by having them pay to be counseled out of the church. The references today will be from The Fate of the Persecutors of the Prophet Joseph Smith, a book by Nels Lundwall. Alfred Randall made a deposition and said that about 10 o'clock on the morning of the 26th day of June, 1844, he was in Carthage, Hancock County, Illinois, and as the troops under Governor Thomas Ford were in squads around the square, he went up to several of them and heard one of the soldiers say, "When I left home, I calculated to see old Joe dead before I returned." When several others said, "So did I." "So did I." "I'll be damned if I don't," was the general reply. One fellow then spoke up and said, "I shouldn't wonder if there is some damned Mormon hearing all we have to say." Another, who stood next to Randall, replied, "If I knew there was, I would run him through with my bayonet." In a few minutes, Randall went to another crowd of soldiers and heard one say, "I guess this will be the last of old Joe." From there, Randall went to Hamilton's Hotel, where Governor Thomas Ford was standing by a fence side, and heard another soldier tell Governor Thomas Ford, "The soldiers are determined to see Joe Smith dead before they leave here." Ford replied, "If you know of any such thing, keep it to yourself." In a short time, Randall started for his own home, stayed all night, and arrived in Nauvoo on the 27th of June, when Governor Ford was making his notorious speech to the citizens at Nauvoo. And further, this deponent said not. Subscribed and sworn to before me this 12th day of February 1855, Thomas Bullock, recorder in the Great Salt Lake County. That was a statement from Alfred Randall. On the 26th day of June, A.D. 1844, near the mansion in the city of Nauvoo, I fell in company with Colonel Enoch C. March and G.O.T.M. Davis, Esquire, from Alton, Illinois, editor of the Telegraph, who had just arrived from Carthage, where they said they had been for some days in company with Governor Ford and others, in council upon the subject of the arrest and trial of Joseph and Hyrum Smith, who were then prisoners in the county jail in Carthage. After considerable conversation between myself and them on the subject of the Mormon religion and the reasons why I had embraced the faith and renounced my former religious discipline, that of the Methodists, Mr. March asked me what I thought of Joe Smith, and if I had any hopes of his return to Nauvoo in safety. I answered that I knew Joseph Smith was a true prophet of the living God, as good and virtuous a man as ever lived upon the earth, that the Book of Mormon was as true as Holy Writ, and was brought forth precisely in the way and manner it purported to be, by the gift and power of the Lord Almighty, and from no other source, and that the revelations he had received and published were eternal truth, and heaven and earth would pass away before one jot or tittle of the same should fall. And all that he pretended to testify to concerning the ministration of holy angels from the heavens to him, the Hyrum and Thummim, the voice of God, his correspondence with the heavens, was the truth and nothing but the truth, and that in relation to his return I had no doubt but that he would be honorably discharged upon his trial by the court, and would be preserved in safety from the power of his enemies, that he was in the hands of his God, whom he loved and faithfully served, and he, who held the destinies of nations in his own hands, would deliver him from his enemies, as he had done hundreds of times before. Colonel March replied, Mr. Wright, you are mistaken, and I know it. You do not know what I know. I tell you they will kill Joe Smith before he leaves Carthage, and I know it, and you never will see him alive again. Said I, Enoch, I do not believe it. He is in the hands of God, and God will deliver him. Says he, I know better. When you hear of him again, you will hear he is dead, and I know it. The people at Carthage wanted permission from the governor to kill you all and burn up your city, and Ford the governor asked me if I thought it was best to suffer it. I replied, no, no, for God's sake, Ford, don't suffer it. That will never do, no, never. Just see for a moment, Ford, what that would do. It would be the means of murdering thousands of innocent men, women, and children, and destroying thousands of dollars worth of property, and that would never do. It would not be sanctioned. It would disgrace the nation. You have got the principal men here under your own control. They are all you want, and what more do you want? When they are out of the way, the thing is settled, and the people will be satisfied. And that is the easiest way you can dispose of it. And Governor Ford concluded, upon the whole, that that was the best policy, and I know it will be done. This is brought to the mayor's office, Great Salt Lake City, Utah Territory, in 1855, January 13. Personally appeared before me Jedediah Grant, mayor of said city, Jonathan Calkins Wright, who being duly sworn deposeth and saith that the foregoing statements contained in his report of the conversation between himself and Enoch C. March, in the presence of G.O.T.M. Davis, Esquire, on the 26th day of June, 1844, in the city of Nauvoo, is true to the best of his knowledge and belief. And further, this opponent saith not. When Joseph Smith rose in the majesty of his calling before God, he saw what we are now hearing of through dispatches received from which week to week. Joseph rose up and said, I will save them if they will let me. He stepped forth like a man and proffered his services to save the nation that is now breaking. And he would have saved it if they had permitted him. What did they bestow upon him in return? They made him a martyr. They crowned him a martyr of Jesus. They performed an act that secures to him crowns of glory, immortality, and eternal lives. They succeeded in shedding his blood and that of the patriarch Hyrum. They shed the blood of the innocent, and the nation said amen to it. Were they aware of it at the seat of government? I have no doubt. They as well knew the plans for destroying the prophet as did those in Carthage or in Warsaw, Illinois. It was planned by some of the leading men in the nation. I have said here once before, to the astonishment of many of our own countrymen, that there was a delegate from each state in the nation when Joseph was killed. These delegates held their council. What were they afraid of? You and me? No, they were afraid of those eternal principles God has revealed from the heavens. They trembled and quaked at the sound of them. Joseph would have saved the nation from ruin. I have heard Joseph say, You will see the sorrows and misery of the world, and the misery that will be upon this land, until you will turn away and pray that your eyes may not be obliged to look upon it. Joseph Smith was induced to surrender himself. I am no false prophet. I am no impostor. I have had no revelations from the devil. The same God that has thus far dictated me and directed me and strengthened me in this work gave me this revelation and commandment on celestial and plural marriage, and the same God commanded me to obey it. He said to me that unless I accepted it and introduced it and practiced it, I, together with my people, would be damned and cut off from this time henceforth. And they say, if I do so, they will kill me. Oh, what shall I do? If I do not practice it, I shall be damned with my people. If I do teach it and practice it and urge it, they say they will kill me, and I know they will. But said he, we have got to observe it. It is an eternal principle, and it was given by way of commandment and not by way of instruction. Here's a recounting of the actual scene where Joseph leaped out of the window. This is by Andrew Jensen, verified by various eyewitnesses. As they were shooting into the jail cell at Carthage, Joseph, seeing there was no safety in the room, turned calmly from the door, dropped his pistol on the floor, and sprang into the same window from which Elder Taylor had attempted to leap. Allegedly, 2 balls pierced him from the door, and one entered his right breast from without, and he fell outward, exclaiming, O Lord, my God. He fell partly on his right shoulder and back, his head and neck reaching the ground a little before his feet, and he rolled instantly on his face. In the instant, Joseph fell out of the window. The cry was raised. He leaped out of the window, and the painted murderers on the stairs and in the entry ran out. Among the murderers outside was a man, barefoot and bareheaded, without a coat, his shirt sleeves rolled up above his elbows and his pants above his knees. He lifted Joseph up and propped him against the south side of the well curb, which stood a few feet from the jail. Colonel Levi Williams then ordered 4 men to shoot him. They stood about 8 feet from the curb and fired simultaneously. A slight cringe in the body was noticed as the ball struck him, and he fell on his face. The ruffian who set him against the well curb then took a bowie knife with the evident intention of cutting off his head, for which, according to reports, A considerable sum of money had been offered by the mob. As he raised the knife and was in the attitude of striking, a light so sudden and powerful burst from the heavens upon the bloody scene, passing its vivid chain between Joseph and the murderers, that they were struck with terror. The arms of the ruffian that held the knife fell powerless. The muskets of the four who fired fell to the ground, and they all stood like marble statues, not having the power to move a single limb of their bodies. After shooting him, the murderers hurried off in a disorderly manner as fast as they could. Colonel Williams shouted to some who had just commenced their retreat to come back and help to carry off the four men who were still paralyzed. They came and carried them away by main strength to the baggage wagons, and they all fled towards Warsaw. We're going to look at some of the highlights of Joseph Smith's stories. This is the story of being in the Missouri dungeon and liberty. This is told by Parley P. Pratt. In one of those tedious nights we had lain as if in sleep till the hour of midnight had passed, and our ears and hearts had been pained while we had listened for hours to the obscene jests, the horrid oaths, and dreadful blasphemies and filthy language of our guards, Colonel Price at their head, as they recounted to each other their deeds of rapine, murder, robbery, etc., which they had committed upon the Mormons while at far west and vicinity. They even boasted of defiling by force wives, daughters, and virgins, and of shooting or dashing out the brains of men, women, and children. I had listened till I became so disgusted, shocked, horrified, and so filled with the spirit of indignant justice that I could scarcely refrain from rising up upon my feet and rebuking the guards, but said nothing to Joseph or anyone else, although I lay next to him and knew he was awake. On a sudden he rose to his feet, and spoke in a voice of thunder, or as the roaring lion, uttering, as near I can recollect, the following words: "Silence, ye fiends of the infernal pit! In the name of Jesus Christ I rebuke you, and command you to be still. I will not live another minute and hear such language. Cease such talk, or you or I die this instant." He ceased to speak. He stood erect in terrible majesty, chained and without a weapon, calm, unruffled, and dignified as an angel. He looked upon the quailing guards, whose weapons were lowered or dropped to the ground, whose knees stood, they smote together, and who, shrinking into a corner or crouching at his feet, begged his pardon, and remained quiet till a change of guards. I have seen the ministers of justice clothed in magisterial robes, and criminals arraigned before them, while life was suspended on a breath in the courts of England. I have witnessed a Congress in solemn session to give laws to nations. I have tried to conceive of kings, of royal courts, of thrones and crowns, and of emperors assembled to decide the fate of kingdoms. But dignity and majesty have I seen but once, as it stood in chains at midnight in a dungeon in an obscure village of Missouri. Autobiography of Parley P. Pratt, pages 228 to 230. These are some other well-known recountings of Brigham Young giving a talk. I heard Joseph Smith say nearly 30 years ago, "They shall have mobbings to their heart's content if they do not redress the wrongs of the Latter-day Saints. Mobs will not decrease, but will increase until the whole government becomes a mob, and eventually it will be state against state, city against city, neighborhood against neighborhood, Methodist against Methodist, and so on. Probably you remember reading not a week ago an account of a conference being held in Baltimore, in the course of which they seceded from their fellow churches in the free states. It will be the same with the other denominations of professing Christians, and it will be Christian against Christian and man against man. And those who will not take up the sword against their neighbors must flee to Zion. That's the Brigham Young prophecy, recounting what Joseph Smith said. Prophet Joseph Smith directly said, "Yet remember, if the Latter-day Saints are not restored to all their rights and paid for all their losses according to the known rules of justice and judgment, reciprocation and common honesty among men, that God will come out of his hiding place and vex this nation with a sore vexation. Yea, the consuming wrath of an offended God shall smoke through the nation with as much distress and woe as independence is blazed through with pleasure and delight." This was a letter from Joseph to Senator John C. Calhoun. History of the Church, Volume 6, 158. Another prophecy by John Taylor. Were we surprised when the last terrible war took place here in the United States? No. Good Latter-day Saints were not, for they had been told about it. Joseph Smith had told them where it would start, that it should be a terrible time of bloodshed, and that it should start in South Carolina. But I tell you today, the end is not yet. You will see worse things than that, for God will lay his hand upon this nation, and they will feel it, more terribly than even they have before. There will be more bloodshed, more ruin, more devastation than ever if they have seen before. Ever that they have seen before. Write it down. You will see it come to pass. It is only just starting in, and would you feel to rejoice? No, I would feel sorry. I knew very well myself when this last war was commencing, that's the Civil War, and could have wept and did weep over this nation. But there is yet to come a sound of war, trouble, and distress, in which brother will be arrayed against brother, father against son, son against father, a scene of desolation and destruction that will permeate our land until it will be a vexation to hear the report itself thereof. Would you help to bring it about? No, I would not. I would stop it if I could. I would pour in the oil and the wine and balm and try to lead people in the right path that will be governed by it. But they won't. Our elders would do the same. We are sending them forth doing all that we can, selecting the very best men we can put our hands upon, men of faith, men of honor, men of integrity, to go forth to preach the gospel to this nation and to other nations. This was after the Civil War, and it's a prophecy of future war to come. Of course, no one's hoping for that. Many might predict that, looking at the condition of our country today. Finally, going back to the martyrdom of Joseph and Hyrum, a traitor in the church itself was a man named Robert E. Foster. He was at the meeting in Nauvoo where they conspired to have Joseph Smith killed. Abraham C. Hodge stated that he had some conversation with Robert E. Foster, who told him his feelings on the subject of Mormonism. He said, "Hodge, you are going to the West. I wish I was going among you, but it can't be so. I am the most miserable wretch that the sun shines upon. If I could recall 18 months of my life, I would be willing to sacrifice everything I have upon earth, my wife and child not excepted. I did love Joseph Smith more than any man that ever lived. If I had been present, I would have stood between him and death. Hodge inquired, "Why did you do as you have done? You were accessory to his murder." He replied, "I know that, and I have not seen one moment's peace since that time. I know Mormonism is true, and the thought of meeting Joseph and Hyrum at the bar of God is more awful to me than anything else." History of the Church, Volume 7, page 513. This concludes this presentation today. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.